Now, I apply this lesson to two issues in our contemporary discussions. The first concerns the age of the universe and the earth, and the second concerns the issue of creation and evolution. Now, concerning the age of the universe and the earth, we recognize that different Christians have different views. Okay? And I would expect that even among the audience today, the audience here today, many of you will have different views. Okay? Some of you will hold on to young creationism, some of you will hold on to old creationism. Different people have different views. Okay? In the 17th century, the Bishop Ussher thinks that the universe originated in 4004 BC, and then there's young creationism, which says that it's not 4004, but it's not too old. It's probably 10,000 years or at most 20,000 years. And we also have this day-age creation, which is a long days creation, saying that each of the days could be a long period of time. And there's another theory, which is called, another way of interpreting the Genesis account, which is called the gap theory, which says that there is a gap of unknown duration between the first verse and the second verse of Genesis. This is the traditional gap theory. And nowadays, there are some scholars, such as John Lennox at Oxford University. He suggests that there might be gaps between each of the day as well. Okay? So between day 1 and day 2, there might be a gap. Between day 2 and day 3, there might be a gap. It is possible. And there's also another view called the literary framework view, which points out that the construction of Genesis can be understood in a poetic way, literary framework, and you don't have to understand it chronologically. And finally, there's also another view called the functional creation view, which says that the word bara in Genesis chapter 1, which is translated as create, God created the heavens and the earth, create. Now, the word create can be taken as a functional creation rather than ontological creation, meaning that the entities could have already existed in a certain state, but God made them functional, to make them function in a certain way with respect to His purposes of wanting to set up a cosmic temple in the Garden of Eden for man to worship Him. Okay? So this passage has to be understood in that way, in the light of God's greater purposes. And that's how he interprets the word creation, create, okay, in Genesis chapter 1 to 3. So I don't have the time to explain these views in detail. Okay, you can check out this little book, okay, which explains them. But I just want to highlight the fact that different Christians have different views about this. Okay, and we shouldn't be dogmatic about this. We shouldn't say, "Oh, it must be interpreted this way." Because the fact is that it doesn't have to be interpreted in a certain way, and we must be careful of the mistakes that Christians have made in the past. Which is to insist that a passage has to be interpreted in a certain way when it doesn't have to be interpreted in a certain way. So we have to be very careful about that, okay, to learn this mistake, in order not to cause any stumbling block to people trying to come to know more about Christianity. Okay. Now, a very important point that we need to pay attention to is that Genesis chapter 1 to 3 is not intended to be a complete account of everything about creation. Okay. For example, why was the earth formless and void near the beginning of chapter 1 in verse 2? Okay. The Bible itself actually does not say. Genesis chapter 1 to 3 does not tell us why is it that the earth was formless and void. Now, in the original Hebrew, formless and void means to be functionless, without function, not fruitful. So it is not a desirable state. Okay? But why was the earth like that? Would God have created a fruitless, unfruitful earth, a functionless earth? Or could there have been some events that took place before that? Okay? Maybe the fall of the angels. That could be possible. I'm not saying that it must be that way, but it could be possible. But whatever the case, the Bible doesn't really tell us, okay, in the opening chapters of Genesis. And again, why was the snake evil? Okay. Now, the snake appeared in chapter 3. And now we know that the snake symbolizes the devil, Satan. Okay. Some people take the snake literally, some people don't take the snake literally, but whether you take it literally or not, the Bible does not tell us why was the snake evil? Why was the snake a deceiver? We know from other chapters in the Bible, in Revelation chapter 12, it tells us that the serpent, right, was Satan, the devil. But this answer was not revealed in the opening chapters of Genesis. It doesn't tell us. So within the text of the scriptures itself, we notice that Genesis chapter 1 to 3 is not intended to be a complete account of everything. And therefore, concerning the details of how God created the universe, for example, how much time he actually took, different interpretations are possible. And different gaps are possible. There could be gaps in between the verses or the days. These are all possible because it's not a complete account of everything. But these different interpretations do not affect the main message of the text, which is that God is the creator, and that he was behind each step of creation. And thus, humans should not worship created things. We shouldn't worship the sun, the moon, the stars, because these things are not gods. These things are made by God. And we should worship the Creator himself, because he alone deserves to be worshipped. And he also has a special plan for humanity. Okay? So this is the main message, the core message of the opening chapters of Genesis. And we can understand them perfectly well, without having to bother too much about how long does God take, all this, because those are not the main message of the text. Okay. So different interpretations of Genesis 1 does not affect us understanding the main message of the text. Now, finally, I end my book by discussing about creation and evolution. Now, this is a highly controversial issue. Okay? It's hotly debated in many parts of the world today. Because some Christians do believe that God could have created biological life using the process of evolution. Okay? Now, in order to understand why that is so, we need to understand that the word evolve, evolution, these words can have different meanings. Okay? Now, it can mean biological change over time, which nobody denies. There is definitely biological change over time. It can also mean the life forms today came from earlier ones. It can also mean genetic variation and natural selection, okay, which is commonly called microevolution. Okay. So the fact that there's some adaptation going on in species. Now again, this nobody denies, right? We all agree that there are some adaptive changes, okay, in living organisms, okay, involving the process of genetic variation and natural selection. Now, what is controversial is the fourth and the fifth point. Okay? The fourth meaning of the term is referring to the process involving the mechanisms of genetic variation and natural selection by which the present diversity of plant and animal life arose from a common ancestor, from a simple life form, evolves and results in the present diversity of life forms. Okay? So this is known as macroevolution. And then there is also what is called naturalistic evolution or theistic evolution, which is the view that the universe and all life came about without God. Okay. Now, it is important to note the distinction between 4 and 5. Okay. Because many people today think that evolution equals to atheism. Many people think that is the case. But actually, that is not the case. Okay? Because there's a difference between 4 and 5, okay, which we need to pay attention to. 4 by itself does not say whether there is a God or not. It could be that there is a God who uses the process involving mechanisms of genetic variation and natural selection to bring about the present diversity of life. Okay? So 4 is open to the possibility that there could be a God behind the process of evolution. Whereas 5 says that no, there isn't God. No? Everything just came about naturally without God. Okay? So this distinction is very important. Okay? We need to pay attention to this distinction. And we need to also recognize that Charles Darwin himself was never an atheist. Okay? So many people today might have the misconception that Darwinism equals atheism. No, Darwin was an atheist, but he was never an atheist. He never denied that there's a God, actually. Darwin himself actually holds to 4. And even after publishing the origins of species in 1859, he, for some years, he still said that there is a creator. Who created using the process of evolution. But towards the end of his life, he became an agnostic. Okay? Meaning that he's not sure whether there's a God or not, but he never denied that there's a God. He never said that there's no God. He never said that. So why is it the case that many people think that Darwinism equals atheism? Why that idea? Where did that idea come from? The idea didn't come from Darwin himself. That idea was popularized by Karl Marx. Karl Marx used Darwinian evolution to support his materialistic philosophy, his communist ideas. And that has huge impact on the world. It spread to Russia, it spread to China, and therefore many people in mainland China think that there's no God. Evolution has shown that there's no God. But actually all these are misconceptions. The theory of evolution by itself does not say that. Okay, so we need to pay attention to this distinction. Now, so concerning 4, whether there is a God behind, concerning 4, different Christians have different views. Okay? So some Christians would disagree, would say that we are not open to the idea of God using evolution to create. Okay, so some Christians have held this view, including those scientists at the Discovery Institute, Stephen Meyer, and also Hugh Ross, who set up the organization called the Reasons to Believe. They argue that there's insufficient evidence for macroevolution. They argue that there's a lack of transitional forces. So what they're trying to say is that if all the present-day life forms came from a common ancestor, we should see many transitional life forms in between the simple life form and the complex life forms. Okay? But when we look at the fossil record, we find that there's actually a lot of missing links, missing gaps. Okay? And therefore, they reject this. Okay? And this lack of transitional fossils is very evident during what is called the Cambrian explosion, which is between 570 to 530 million years ago. Now, however, there are other Christians who would say that 4 merely describes a process which God could use, could choose to use to create various life forms. And these Christians include such eminent theologians as Benjamin Warfield, who, by the way, is the father of modern-day fundamentalism, interestingly. Because we know that modern-day fundamentalist Christians reject evolution very staunchly. But Benjamin Warfield himself was open to evolution. Okay? He defended the inerrancy of Scripture very passionately. And in more recent times, we have C.S. Lewis, whom I'm sure all of you know, one of the most popular Christian writers and apologists. And John Stott, one of the most eminent biblical scholars, Alistair McGrath, J.I. Packer, John Walton, N.T. Wright, Tim Keller. William Lane Craig is open to the possibility of evolution too. He says that on theological grounds, it is possible, although he himself is skeptical about evolution on scientific grounds. Okay, but that's a different issue. Okay. But on theological ground, he thinks that, it is possible. God could have chosen to do that. And we have big denominations like the United Presbyterian Church, Lutheran World Federation, and also the Roman Catholic Church. They accepted the idea that God could choose to use evolution to create various life forms. Now, we need to understand what are the reasons why these Christians say that. Okay? And the reason is, first of all, we need to note that there are different levels of explanations. Okay? So, for example, when we read the Psalms, for example, Psalm 139, verse 13, which says that for you, God, formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. Okay? Now, when we read passages like this, and we think about modern embryology, which has shown to us how the embryo can be formed by a process which involves the genes. Now, the discovery of the scientific process of embryology does not contradict this verse. Why? Because we can say that the discovery of this process is merely describing the process by which God used to form the embryo. Okay, so there are different levels of explanation. Okay, there's the scientific level, but there's also a level that's beyond that, which is what caused science, right? What caused those natural laws? Who created the DNA? Where did the universe come from? Why does the nature work in this way? Okay, so we can say that God set up the laws of nature and used these laws to bring about the embryo, different kind of life. Okay, so there are different levels of explanation. And it's interesting to note that the Hebrew words, the same Hebrew words, yatzar and asar, okay, which is translated as create, made, formed, okay, in the Genesis. These words, which describe the 9-month-long process of development from 2 single cells, okay, the sperm and the egg, into a fully formed human being, are used to describe the earth creation of different types of animals as well, okay, in direct response to God's command. In other words, in the emergence of plant and animal life through earth history, we find the same general trajectory as the formation of an embryo in the womb. First single cells, then multicellularity, and then more complex organisms. The exact same Hebrew words asar and yazar that describes God's forming of embryos in the womb and God's forming of plant and animal life are used to describe God's forming of the human species. And therefore the use of these words implies, or at least does not rule out, that God forming humankind was a process and not an instantaneous event. Okay? Because we know that the creation of the embryo was not an instantaneous event, right? It takes 9 months, okay, for an embryo to form. Okay? And therefore the creation of life forms and human beings can also be a process. It does not have to be, God created instantly. It doesn't have to be like that. Okay? It could be a process as well. The same Hebrew words are used. Okay, so this is very important to take note. And so, when we look at this process, the Old Testament scholar Bruce Walkie observes that Genesis is concerned with ultimate cause, the ultimate level of explanation, which is God. God is behind the order of the universe. He's the ultimate cause, first cause of everything. Okay, so when the psalmist says, God knit me together in my mother's womb, in Psalm 139 verse 13, the psalmist is not intending to comment on genetics or intermediate cause. Okay? And likewise, in Genesis, the narrator only tells us that God commands the earth to bring forth life. Okay? He does not explain how that bringing forth occurs. So this is a very important theological point that we need to take note of. And so, I'm sure we can all accept this. Okay? But why? So why not accept this? Okay. Okay. Now, it is because of these reasons that Benjamin Warfield, okay, the father of modern fundamentalism, say that there is no question as to the compatibility of Darwinian form of evolution with Christianity. He thinks that it's perfectly compatible. And what this implies is that Christians can believe in evolution. Okay. In fact, I have already highlighted many examples of Christians who do believe in evolution, right? C.S. Lewis, Tim Keller, all these people. So Christians can believe in evolution, but they don't have to. Okay? If you don't believe, that's fine. Okay? We are not going to force you. Your pastor is not going to force you to believe in evolution. Okay? You can have the freedom to believe or the freedom not to believe. Okay? I think Christians can have the liberty at this point. Okay, so with regards to the creation of humans, now, some people are troubled by the idea of human beings coming about by the evolution process. But we need to pay closer attention to the biblical text, okay, to Genesis chapter 1, in order to understand what is a human. According to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26-27, it tells us that the humans are created in the image of God. Okay? And it's crucial to understand what is meant by this. What does the image of God means? Okay? Now, we mustn't go away with the idea that the image of God refers to a physical body. Okay? Because God is not a physical body. God is a spirit. Okay? So where the body comes from is not important actually. Whether our physical body came by the process of evolution or whether it didn't come from the process of evolution, that is not the crucial issue. Okay? The crucial issue is our spirit, our soul. Okay? God is a spirit. The image must be referring to the spiritual aspect rather than the bodily aspect of human. And what the image of God actually means is that humans are created to be representatives of God, to represent God rule the earth, to subdue the earth, in the place of God, to be the vice regent of God, to govern the world. That is what the image of God means in the Genesis text. Okay, so to represent God, to have this spiritual capacity for that kind of work. So it doesn't refer to the body; it refers to the spiritual aspect of the human. Now, Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 says that God formed the man of dust from the ground. Okay. Now, in the past, I used to interpret this verse as saying that God took up the dust and then and then become a living being. Okay. It was an instantaneous process. And I think many Sunday school textbooks, when they draw pictures, they draw it that way, like that, as if God forming dust, like making a stand dust, and then they try to use pictures, pictorial form, to describe that process. But actually, this kind of description, God forming the dust and then instantaneous, this kind of description, this kind of pictures is not what the Bible says. The biblical text does not say that it is created in that way. That is not biblical, actually. Because when we look at the Bible, first of all, we understand that dust from the ground refers to the composition of the body, okay, not the process by which it's formed. And the word form, I mentioned earlier on, in the original Hebrew, yatzah, okay? Yatzah, which, as I explained earlier on, can refer to a process. It doesn't have to be an instantaneous event. Okay? It could be a process. How long? We don't know. Okay? But it could be a process. Okay? So, whatever the case, the word yatzah does not specify the process of formation. Okay? So it could be evolution, it could be not evolution, we don't know. But it's open to the possibility of evolution. Okay? It doesn't reject the possibility. Now, many Christians are concerned about the phrase according to their kinds in Genesis chapter 1. Okay? It says that God created the living things according to their kinds. Doesn't this imply a fixity of species? God created tigers, God created lions. Tigers remain tigers, lions remain lions. According to their kinds. Does it imply fixity of species? Actually, it doesn't. What this phrase means, in the original Hebrew, lemim, okay, is the phrase. Okay, lemim. Now, lemim can be understood as saying that God created various biological life forms following the kinds which He has planned. According to various kinds. Two kinds, create two kinds. So God created various kinds. Okay. So the Old Testament scholar Richard Hess at Denver Seminary, he says that this phrase simply say that God created various biological life forms, but it does not specify the process of creation, nor does it exclude the possibility that God could allow certain creatures of a particular kind to evolve into another kind, so as to bring about various kinds of creatures which He has planned. Okay. So again, it does not exclude the possibility of the evolutionary process. So what I have argued so far is that the biblical text actually does not exclude the possibility of evolution. And therefore, for us Christians, when we approach this text, I think we must be open to different possible interpretations. We must be charitable, okay, to some Christians who might want to embrace evolution. We shouldn't say that they are heretics. We must be charitable to these Christians. People like Tim Keller, C.S. Lewis, we don't want to say that they're heretics. John Stott. So I think we must be charitable. I think we shouldn't be dogmatic, okay, about any particular interpretation. We need to be open to different possibilities, okay, because the text itself does not demand that we must embrace any particular view. Okay? So there are different possibilities, and we must also be careful about the lesson of history, which has taught us not to be dogmatic when the text itself does not require us to be dogmatic. Having said that, okay, I want to point out that evolution cannot account for the origin of the universe, the origin of the order of the universe, as well as the origin of life. Okay? So evolution cannot be a complete story of how everything came about. Right? Because evolution only tells us how living creatures can evolve from a simpler life form. It does not tell us where did the first life came from. And it also doesn't tell us how could the first life came about. Because in order for the first life to came about, the universe must already exist, right? And the universe must have certain order, okay, in order for natural selection to be even possible. Where did that order come from? Where did the universe come from? So we are back to the issue of first cause. Where did everything come from? And I've already shown that there are good reasons to believe that there must be a first cause who is an uncaused, beginningless, timeless creator. Okay, so whether someone accepts evolution or not, he cannot escape from the conclusion that there must be a creator. of the universe, and who also designed the laws of the universe, in order for life to be possible in this universe. Okay? So the conclusion of a creator cannot be avoided by evolutionary theories. Okay? So whether there is evolution or not, there must be a God. Okay, there must be a God. Okay? That's the point. Okay? And in fact, the origin of life is such a huge problem for naturalistic evolution that Anthony Flew, who was one of the most eminent atheist philosopher of the 20th century, for 40 over years, he tells students all around the world that there is no God. There's no God. Okay? But in 2005, he changed his mind. And he says that, yeah, okay, I finally come to believe that there must be a God. And the reason why is because he chose to pay closer attention to the issue of the origin of life. Where did the first DNA come from? Where did the first functional DNA come from? That, in order for that to come about, he explained that what I think is that the DNA material has done is that it has shown by almost unbelievable complexity of the arrangement which are needed to produce life, that intelligence must have been involved in getting these extraordinary diverse elements to work together. Okay? Because the DNA is a very complicated code. Okay? To get these different chemical elements to form together into a workable code, it couldn't have come about by chance. It couldn't have come about. And not only that, you need the code to have a code, but that is not enough. You also need to have a decoding mechanism. Something that can understand the code, that can translate the code into something workable. Just like if you have a computer software, that is not enough to work, right? You also need to have a hardware that can decode, that can understand the software in order for it to be functional. So how can all these things come together by chance? It's like setting up a factory by chance. It's impossible. It couldn't have occurred naturalistically. And therefore, Anthony Flew, because of the evidence of this, he has chosen to believe that there must be a designer, there must be a creator to bring these elements together. Okay? He could use various processes. Okay? Some scientists think that there could be some DNA chemical, some elements that eventually resulted in the DNA in outer space, whatever. But there must be a creator who brings all these things together in order to form this workable DNA and its decoding mechanism, the first life. Okay, so there must be a God. Okay. And what the DNA has shown us is that life is really amazing. It's amazing that we can all be sitting here today. This is amazing. So when we look at life, when we look at creation, we can really agree with the psalmist when he says, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the awesome universe with billions of stars, working with this remarkable order. You can say that, what is man that you are mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them. And we can also agree with the psalmist when he says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Okay. The evidence for God is so evident in the creation, in the nature. But it is very sad that nowadays, many people fail to see the glory of God in creation. And the reason why they fail to see the glory of God in the natural world is because of bad philosophy, scientism, bad philosophy. It's because of many misconceptions that they have about Christianity. And some of these misconceptions have been caused by Christians ourselves. Okay? So we also have a part, we also should bear some of the blame. We shouldn't just blame the atheists, but we have caused some of the misconceptions by spreading pseudoscience, by telling people, you must believe in 6 days, 6 literal days, as in 6 24-hour days, that kind of thing. So the way that Christians have defended their faith is quite problematic sometimes. It has caused many people to be put off by this kind of approach, thinking that Christians are ignorant, they are really unscientific, they don't know what they're talking about. So it's sad to see that happening. It's sad to see people being put off by Christianity in that way. So what I pray is that my book will help to clear away some of this bad philosophical thinking, some of these misconceptions, clear away these obstacles, so that more Christians can be strengthened in their faith, and that more people can come to see the glory of God, which is manifested in creation, and to embrace Jesus Christ as their Lord and as their Savior. Thank you.